one's Separation and Identity, which is comes from a long-form poem called Sphere, the Form of Emotion by Jeff Abramoff. And I pull a lot of titles out of this particular poem, not because of the poem exactly, but there's a lot of great little phrases and lines. And, you know, when I find something that strikes me, something that on a lot of these I like to use let the title add a lot of the psychological impact of the work, where maybe it doesn't come through just directly in the piece. Just I always want a slight sense of the tragic and melancholy and kind of looming in the background of the work, as well as kind of an excitement and freshness about it. But I'm always sort of that dichotomy of kind of fun, exciting, new, but always kind of something a little bit darker behind it. It goes back to a little bit of a ways. Everything I do kind of comes out from what happens in the biography of my life, essentially. After I graduated from the School of Visual Arts in 2004, I found work in a print shop with a trade show exhibit design company, and they had old printers that had to be filled with bottles of ink, and the prints would never dry on time. They were constantly getting damaged. It was a little nightmare. So I started experimenting with inkjet ink and the different print media that I was using to print on, which was polypropylene. It's a lot of like high-end stuff that is built for durability, built for like rolling and unrolling a lot. So that's where the inkjet ink collage work came from. The video projection stuff, I started doing video projections with bands back in about 2007, which I would mix video live improvisationally while the bands would play and be projected behind them. And getting into that world and learning the software and the different things like that, the technology behind it, I decided to try and turn some of that onto the paintings. I've seen people do projection mapping on architecture, where they draw out the lines of the architecture and make the building look like it's falling apart, all these interesting things, and changing it essentially by the use of light. So I wanted to try something like that with the painting. So I decided at first just to try to take a picture of it and then align the photograph on top of the piece and see what that did, and immediately created this interesting sort of 3D vibration between the live object and the projected object. So I tried that, and then essentially what that is with this is it's the photograph aligned on top of it with the video effects slowly being applied to it by the software. So it's a color changing effect, and it's also bringing out these highlights around the edges, that kind of thing. So the past couple months I've been kind of taking all my work and then sort of reimagining it by the use of the projector. Come pretty fast because the ink almost dries instantaneously. That's part of the makeup of the chemistry of the papers that I use, because the printers are going one or another. They print out and they roll back up immediately, so everything has to dry very quickly. So I kind of splatter the ink around on the floor and let it do what it do, pick it up, make little runs, and try to just see what kind of effects I can get out of it. And it dries pretty quick, within 10-20 minutes it's pretty much dry. I leave it overnight just to get good and settled and get the oxygen out of the ink. And then this piece in particular came together really fast once I had the collage material. It maybe took 3 hours, something like that. It was very fast, and the material actually started to bubble because of the glues I was using. So it was a little bit distracting. So I kind of went back into it and started adding a little collage over it, painting into it a little bit to kind of make the bubbling more a part of the piece, so it didn't look like it was something that was just a mistake or a byproduct. And so that took a little bit extra time, but they come together very quickly. And then actually the photograph has to be taken on site from the angle that the projector is shooting at it, so that part all happens really in real time, and the effects are all being applied to it by software in real time. It's run by a laptop that's hidden behind this wall. The software that I use is called Resolume. There's a couple different kind of softwares that are made for this kind of thing. This particular one I've been using for a couple of years. I find it works really well. It's got a lot of interesting effects, and it's used for being able to take these loops of different video clips and mix them in real time, apply effects so you can synchronize it to the music. And there's also some automated features. You can set it so the effect applies itself and then it goes away very slowly, and that kind of thing. Most recently, particularly with this work, I was influenced by, I went to see Mark Rothko's black paintings at the National Gallery in D.C. a few months ago, and they're very ominous. The room has this soundtrack in the background, it's very slow classical music, and they were only lit by the skylights in the room. And it just had this real, I always loved his work with the color, but the real darkness to him, like having to sit there and sort of meditate on it and watching the purples and the black kind of appear, and then against that darkness you sort of see the light of the animate world around you sort of vibrating off that. So that's where I sort of like that darkness, that little bit of a melancholy in the things, because I think that sort of is always lingering in the back of your mind, death, tragedy, and that kind of thing. So once I saw those, I finally got which another artist, which is actually somebody I went to school with. His name is Jim D'Amato. He does these sort of web-like abstractions that are sort of like circles and webs going through space, down into space. And I was always curious as to why his work had this sort of melancholy aspect when from what I know of him, he's very animated, very like spiritually excited kind of person. But when I saw those raw black paintings, that sort of put it together for me, and then I, even influenced by his work as far as how I want to place things spatially, I kind of want this surfaceness and then these areas that go a little deeper. So, for the most recent work, the last 6 months or so, has really been influenced by my friend Jim and through our dialogue, and then those Mark Rothko black paintings. Do your best to look into technology and that kind of things, because especially right now, painting has been. We've been doing the same things over and over and over again for years now. So, and I think there's a real opportunity to look into the technologies of production, reproduction, printing materials, the projection materials, video. I think there's a lot of different things that can be brought into stuff, and just to use that knowledge of the internet, social network, and all that kind of that bombardment of information, all that stuff that we deal with, and translate that in real ways to the kind of work, because it's we need to be using all that kind of stuff so that art feels real to our generation and makes sense to our generation. I think people assume that everything's been done, or that things are just being rehashed over and over again, and I don't think it's true necessarily. I think there's a lot of stuff out there that artists can start using and start to look at, and then ultimately you just have to be honest to how you have to make art how that it makes sense in your life. How if you're a lazy person, find art that makes sense in that way. If you're, I'm impatient with the process. I can't sit and use oil paint and let it dry and then change it. I want to change things too drastically. So, doing collage work, using inks, things that are very immediate, came naturally to me. And then just through the process of your life, let it seep into your work. I worked at a print shop. That stuff got into work. I do video projections with bands, DJs, and stuff. So I brought that into the work. So it's just, just find those things that make sense to you and make sense to your life and are unique to our generation, and bring those out so we can help define a new era for artists.